So Imam al Ghazali rahimahullah, who wrote this book, he was an amazing person. You know, he lived in a time where the Muslim empire was at its peak in civilization in Iraq, and they were the ones who, at this point in time, in this century, which was the 6th century of Islam, they were at the peak of giving back to society. They were at the peak of science. They were some of the ones who dedicated works in technology and mathematics, etc. And that is why scholars in the time of Imam al Ghazali were some of the highest paid, more than doctors at the time of Imam al Ghazali, which shows you how much they took importance to knowledge. Now, one thing we need to know about this is that Imam al Ghazali went through an existential crisis. He started to question himself, and he started to realize in himself that he may be seeking knowledge and the status as a great scholar for the wrong reasons. He was given the highest position in Madrasatul Nizamiya, which was the Nizami university in Iraq, which was the highest form of education in Iraq at that time. And he was the head of it. He became the head dean. Not only that, he became an advisor to the sultans. So he had this like massively huge position. Everybody was going to him and asking questions. He had a professorship. He was the man in Iraq at that time. One day he found this particular crisis in him, to such an extent that when he went to start to teach, he was feeling like this restrictive feeling in his chest, like restriction. And he couldn't even talk when he started to open his mouth. He just stopped talking. And he felt that why he was seeking this knowledge wasn't for true sincerity for God, to the extent that he lost the ability to talk and he just walks out of Madrasatul Nizamiya from Baghdad. What happens eventually, in a long story short, because we're not going to go into the life of Imam al Ghazali, Imam al Ghazali went through 10 years searching and training his soul to overcome the feeling of showing off and the ego and the self in having sincerity and truthfulness with the Creator, with one's Lord, in teaching, in going into teaching the religious sciences, the sacred sciences. And what he did is, in these 10 years, he lived in Damascus, and he lived in Jerusalem, and he went to Mecca and Medina, and he spent his time in seclusion, and he spent his time in secluded worship and reflection, and truly understanding the deeper meanings of Islam and the inner objectives and inner dimensions and the spiritual understandings of Islam. So it took him 10 years. He just separated from everyone. And what he said is, I'm going to go to pilgrimage to Hajj. And he wasn't lying. He did go to pilgrimage, but it just took him a 10-year long journey for him to do that. Now, Imam al Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, in this 10-year period, he wrote a book which is known as one of the greatest books to be written in the entire corpus of Islam. And that is the revival of the sacred sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin. He wrote this book in this 10-year period. And in there he talks about all of the integral factors you need to overcome your ego and yourself, and to revive the sacred sciences for the true purpose and objective that they came for, which is what? To call to the sincerity of the oneness of God, to be truthful to God and God alone, to not to seek with this religion a position in this world or material gain. That's the entire reason he wrote this book. Basically, it was a manual for himself, which he thought everybody else could benefit from. When he came back to Iraq, he became again a headmaster. He became even greater because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, raised his status because he made his intention sincere. And that is why it's important to know this story of this man. Why? Because all of us are going through this existential crisis. Every one of us is going through the same difficulty. So when you hear from a man who's actually gone and done it and overcome his self and his ego, and he wrote this book telling you the steps of the beginning of guidance, this is a man you need to listen to.